A wolf howled, then another. Then hundreds answered from the frozen northern wilderness, until the mountains themselves seemed to mourn. Alpha King Tristan Ravencrest stopped his horse. Across the snow-covered valley stood a young woman surrounded by an enormous pack of legendary white wolves that had once hunted every Ravencrest soldier who crossed the northern border. Tomorrow at sunset, the Iron Fang Coalition would launch its final invasion. If the mysterious wolf leader fell before then, every forgotten village in the north would burn, and the last chance to uncover the truth behind the palace massacre would disappear forever. Yet Tristan could not move, because the woman facing him wore the silver crescent pendant he had fastened around his infant daughter's neck on the day she was born. Before we uncover why the Alpha King believes the daughter he buried is standing before him alive, subscribe if you love emotional werewolf romance stories filled with hidden heirs, ancient destinies, and unforgettable family bonds. Now let us return to the moment that changed an entire kingdom. Snow drifted between them. The white wolves remained perfectly still. Not one growled, not one advanced. Their icy blue eyes never left their young leader. She stepped forward calmly, her simple white fur cloak moving with the northern wind. Long silver white hair framed a face both unfamiliar and painfully familiar. Tristan's heart pounded. Impossible. The palace had buried his daughter 21 years ago. He had stood beside the tiny coffin himself. Yet the pendant hanging around this stranger's neck bore the royal crest engraved by his own father. Only one had ever existed. The young woman met his gaze without fear. "You should not have come here, Your Majesty." Her voice was steady, gentle, almost compassionate. Tristan could barely breathe. "What is your name?" She looked toward the wolves before answering. "My family calls me Lyra." The name struck him harder than any sword, because before the massacre, his queen had whispered the very same name into their newborn daughter's ear. The North remembered children no kingdom remembered. Its villages stood beyond official maps, beyond royal taxes, beyond royal protection. When winter storms buried the mountain roads, the people did not wait for kings, they waited for wolves. Long before anyone knew her as the White Wolf leader, Lyra Ashwinter was simply a quiet little girl wrapped in an oversized wool blanket, sleeping beside a fire that never seemed warm enough. Luna Celine Ashbrook had carried her through 3 days of blinding snow after escaping the palace massacre. She had buried her own name beneath the mountains. She had buried every trace connecting the child to Ravencrest. Only one thing remained: the silver crescent pendant hidden beneath the little girl's clothes. Every night before Lyra fell asleep, Selena held the pendant for only a moment before hiding it again. "Never let anyone see this," young Lyra always nodded. She never asked why. Children raised by grief learned very early which questions caused tears. Their cottage stood beside an abandoned pine forest, where forgotten travelers rarely passed. The roof leaked every spring, the fireplace smoked every winter. Most days they survived on dried roots, rabbit stew, and berries gathered from frozen hillsides. Selene often claimed she had already eaten. Lyra believed her, until she became old enough to notice the untouched bowl sitting beside the door every evening. One winter, food disappeared entirely. Snow buried every hunting trail. The streams froze. The villagers quietly began dividing what little remained among the children. Lyra watched an elderly man secretly hand half his bread to a widow. The widow quietly gave hers to 2 frightened brothers. The brothers broke theirs apart for an injured shepherd. Nobody possessed enough. Yet somehow, nobody allowed another family to starve alone. That night, Lyra whispered, "Why do they keep giving away food?" Celine smiled despite her exhaustion. Because hunger shared becomes hope. The answer never left her heart. When Lyra reached 10 years of age, she followed strange paw prints into the northern forest. Enormous tracks, far larger than ordinary wolves. Every hunter warned children never to follow them. Lyra did anyway. Deep within the silent woods, she discovered an enormous white wolf lying beside a frozen river. A hunting spear had pierced its shoulder. Most people would have run. Lyra slowly approached. The wolf growled, not fiercely, painfully. Without speaking, she broke the spear shaft, then carefully cleaned the wound with melted snow and medicinal herbs Selena had taught her to gather. The wolf never attacked. When she finished, it quietly stood. Their eyes met, then it disappeared into the forest. 3 days later, another wolf appeared outside the cottage, then another, then dozens. White, silent, watching. The villagers panicked. Celine simply walked outside. She looked toward the largest wolf. "You remember kindness." The alpha wolf slowly lowered its head. Not to Celine, to Lyra. From that day forward, the White Moon wolves never again hunted anyone living in the northern villages. Instead, they hunted beside them. When harsh winters arrived, deer mysteriously wandered close to the settlements. Lost children always found enormous white paw prints leading them safely home. Travelers crossing dangerous mountain passes often awoke to discover wolves had silently guarded their camps throughout the night. Stories spread across the north. Some claimed the wolves obeyed an ancient forest spirit. Others believed the mountains themselves protected the forgotten people. Only Elder Fenric knew the truth. He found Lyra sitting beneath an ancient cedar one spring morning, while 3 young wolf cubs slept peacefully against her shoulders. The old elder laughed softly. "I wondered how long it would take." Lyra looked up. "For what?" "For the blood to remember." She frowned. "I do not understand." "You will." He never explained further. Instead, he began teaching her the old ways, how to read snowfall carried by northern winds, how wolves communicated without sound, how ancient packs settled disputes before claws were ever drawn. Most importantly, he taught her that true leadership belonged to the one who ate last, walked last, and accepted the greatest burden. "King's command," he often said. "Guardians endure." Lyra chose the second lesson. Years passed. The little girl became a young woman, strong, patient, fearless. She wore no jewels, no crown, only a weathered white cloak stitched together countless times by Celine's careful hands. Whenever distant kingdoms fought another meaningless border war, refugees eventually reached the north. Hungry, cold, terrified. Lyra welcomed every family without asking where they came from. Enemy soldiers, former prisoners, abandoned children. None were turned away. One evening, a frightened boy asked, "Which kingdom protects this place?" Lyra smiled gently. "The people do." Word slowly spread beyond the mountains. Not about a princess, not about lost royalty, about a mysterious young woman whose wolves defended strangers instead of territory. Meanwhile, inside Ravencrest Palace, Alpha King Tristan continued searching for answers buried beneath 2 decades of silence. Every year he personally visited the small royal tomb where his infant daughter supposedly rested. Every year he left fresh white flowers. Every year he whispered the same apology. "I should have protected you." He never noticed that the grave contained another child's remains. Far away, Selene watched Lyra leading villagers rebuilding a bridge destroyed by spring floods. Pride filled her tired eyes. So did fear. She had hidden the greatest secret in the kingdoms for 21 years. Secrets rarely remained buried forever. That evening, Elder Fenric climbed the hill overlooking the village. He carried an ancient wooden staff carved with wolves circling a silver moon. His expression was unusually grave. "They have begun searching." Selene froze. "Who?" "The kingdoms. They finally learned the white moon wolves follow a human leader." Lyra quietly joined them. "They think I command the wolves." Fenric slowly shook his head. "No. They fear the wolves obey you willingly." A heavy silence followed. Then the elder looked directly into Lyra's eyes. "There is something you have never been told." Before he could continue, every wolf in the valley suddenly lifted its head. One by one, then all together, a deep chorus echoed through the northern wilderness. Not a warning, not a hunt, a summons, older than memory itself. Fenric closed his eyes. The ancient blood bond. It has awakened. Far beyond the mountains, an Alpha King unknowingly rode toward the daughter he had mourned for 21 years. And deep beneath the snow-covered forest, something forgotten by history had finally remembered her name. The wolves parted before the king, not because they feared him, because she had not told them to attack. Alpha King Tristan Ravencrest slowly dismounted. His soldiers remained behind. None dared cross the invisible line drawn across the snow by hundreds of silent white wolves. Commander Rowan Hale tightened his grip on his sword. "Your Majesty, this could be a trap." Tristan never looked away from the young woman standing across the frozen clearing. "No, it feels like the opposite." The northern wind carried her scent toward him. At first, he noticed only snow, fresh pine, wild moonflowers blooming where no flowers should survive winter. Then something deeper reached him, a familiar warmth, a memory, milk, lavender, moonlight. His body suddenly froze. Electricity surged through every vein. His heartbeat thundered against his ribs. Not the instinct of a mate bond. Something older. Something written into the first blood of Ravencrest itself. His wolf did not growl, it bowed. A deep, ancient vibration echoed through his soul, the ancient blood bond, the forgotten instinct binding parent and child long before kingdoms existed. Tristan staggered backward. Commander Rowan reached toward him. "Your Majesty, I am fine." He was lying. His entire body trembled. Across the clearing, Lyra instinctively pressed one hand against her chest. She had felt it too. An invisible thread stretched between them. Not painful, not frightening, unbreakable. For the first time in her life, the lonely emptiness she had carried since childhood no longer felt empty. She quietly whispered, "What is happening?" Before anyone answered, Luna Selene emerged from the nearby trees. Time seemed to stop. Tristan stared in disbelief. "Selene?" The woman lowered her hood. Her hair had become almost completely silver. Deep lines marked her face. Yet there was no mistaking her. She had once served as the personal Luna guardian to Queen Alara. The night of the massacre, she had disappeared, along with the king's daughter. Commander Rowan could barely speak. We buried you." Selene smiled sadly. "No, you buried a lie." Silence fell across the valley. Even the wolves remained perfectly still. Tristan slowly stepped forward. His voice cracked. "Tell me, what happened that night?" Selene closed her eyes. For 21 years, she had rehearsed this moment. Yet now that it had finally arrived, every word felt impossibly heavy. The palace was already lost before the attack began. There were traitors inside every gate. They wanted the royal bloodline erased forever. She looked toward Lyra. "When I reached the nursery, your daughter was still alive." Tristan stopped breathing. "I had only seconds, so I wrapped her inside a servant's blanket. I exchanged her with another infant, who had already died during the attack." Commander Rowan lowered his sword. His hands shook uncontrollably. "My God," Selene continued. "The rebels believed they had killed the princess. They never searched again. I fled north. I never intended to hide forever. I only wanted her to survive. Tears streamed silently down Tristan's face. I buried someone else's child. Celine nodded. You buried an innocent child. And because of that, your daughter lived. The king covered his face with one trembling hand. Every year, every flower, every apology spoken beside the tiny grave. None had reached the child he mourned. She had been alive all along, only a few steps away now. Lyra remained silent. She looked from Celine to Tristan, then quietly asked, You knew my parents? Celine slowly turned toward her. No. I knew your mother. I promised her that if she died, I would love you enough for both of us. Lyra's silver blue eyes filled with tears. You never told me. I could not. If they discovered who you were, every kingdom would have hunted you. Elder Fenric stepped forward. His ancient wooden staff rested against the frozen earth. The time for hiding has ended. He looked directly at Tristan. The North already follows her. Not because of blood, because of character. One by one, villagers emerged from nearby homes. An elderly blacksmith, the widow Lyra had fed every winter. Children she had carried through blizzards, hunters, farmers, refugees. None bowed to a princess. They simply stood beside the woman who had stood beside them first. A little girl walked toward Tristan. She held a carved wooden wolf. Miss Lyra fixed our roof. An old fisherman added, She rebuilt our bridge. A young mother smiled through tears. She buried my husband when nobody else came. Another voice followed. She never asked where we came from. Another. She always ate after everyone else. Another. She taught our children to read. Soon, the entire village spoke, not with rehearsed praise, with memories, acts of kindness, quiet sacrifices, promises kept. Tristan listened to every word. Each one became another wound inside his heart, because every story described the queen his kingdom had needed. And the daughter he had never known. He had. Commander Rowan finally understood. We searched every kingdom. We searched every fortress. We searched every noble house. He looked around the humble village. We never searched where hope lived. A sudden horn blast shattered the silence, then another and another. One of the white moon wolves sprinted onto the hill overlooking the valley. Its ears flattened. Its growl rolled like distant thunder. Elder Fenric's expression hardened. They found us, far beyond the tree line. Hundreds of black banners appeared between the snow-covered pines, then hundreds more, Ironfang. Blackmore, the coalition. Lord Cassian rode at the center of the advancing army beside Warlord Darius Ironfang. Cassian smiled as he looked across the valley. So, the lost princess truly survived. Darius slowly drew his enormous war axe. Bring me the girl. Alive. Kill anyone who stands beside her. The villagers instinctively moved closer to Lyra. Not away. The white moon wolves stepped forward as one, a living wall of white fur. Tristan slowly unsheathed his sword. For the first time in 21 years, he stood beside his daughter. Not as a king, as a father, his golden eyes never left the approaching army. Quietly, almost like a vow spoken only to the wind, he said, This time, no one will take you from me. The ancient blood bond answered with a deep, powerful pulse, and every white wolf in the valley lifted its head toward the darkening sky. The North had chosen its family. Now it was ready to defend it. The first arrow never reached its target. A white wolf leaped through the air. Its jaws closed around the shaft. The arrow splintered. The battlefield fell silent for one impossible heartbeat. Then chaos erupted. Hold the line! Commander Rowan's voice thundered across the valley. Royal guards formed a defensive wall before the villagers. The White Moon Wolves moved without a single command. They did not charge. They flowed, like moonlit rivers crossing fresh snow. Every family, every child, every elder. A living shield of white fur surrounded them all. Across the valley, Lord Cassian Blackmore slowly raised one hand. "Advance!" Thousands of soldiers marched forward. Black banners darkened the frozen horizon. Iron shields collided. War horns roared. Snow exploded beneath countless boots. Warlord Darius Ironfang smiled beneath his scarred helmet. "I expected an army. Instead, I found peasants protected by animals." He lifted his enormous axe. "Erase them." The coalition surged downhill. The earth shook. Her stepped calmly toward the front of the village. She wore no armor, no royal cloak. Only the same weathered white fur mantle Selena had sewn with her own hands years ago. A frightened child grabbed her sleeve. "Will we lose?" Lyra knelt before him. She gently brushed snow from his hair. "Not while we still protect each other." The boy nodded. Fear gave way to courage. He hurried toward the evacuation line. Tristan watched the exchange. His heart tightened. She had inherited her mother's kindness. She had learned none of it inside a palace. The kingdom had lost 21 years with its princess. The North had gained 21 years with its guardian. Cassian pointed directly toward Lyra. "Take her alive. Everyone else is expendable." Those words echoed across the valley. The villagers heard them. The wolves heard them. Tristan heard them. His wolf answered with a thunderous growl. "No." The single word carried through the battlefield, not shouted, declared. Golden light burst around the Alpha King. His enormous black wolf erupted from within him, towering, muscular, eyes blazing like molten gold. Soldiers instinctively slowed. Many had fought Tristan before. None had ever seen him fight as a father. He met the first wave head-on. One strike, a shield shattered. Another, an axe spun harmlessly into the snow. Another. 3 soldiers crashed backward without fatal wounds, but completely unable to continue fighting. Commander Rowan led the royal guard beside him. "Protect the civilians!" Steel rang against steel. Snow became a whirlwind beneath pounding feet. The White Moon Wolves slipped effortlessly between enemy formations. They disarmed. They separated. They drove attackers away from innocent people. Not once did they hunt for revenge. Only protection. Darius roared. "Cowards!" He shifted. Bones cracked. Armor burst apart. An enormous gray wolf covered in old scars landed upon the battlefield with earth-shaking force, his crimson eyes fixed upon Lyra. "There you are!" he charged. The ground fractured beneath every stride. Tristan moved to intercept. Too late. The distance was too great. Selene screamed. "Lyra!" Lyra never moved. She simply stood, calm, steady. Her hand rested lightly against the silver pendant hanging around her neck. The White Moon Wolves suddenly stopped fighting, every one of them. Hundreds of wolves turned toward Lyra at exactly the same moment. The wind disappeared. Snowflakes froze in the air. An ancient howl echoed across the mountains, not from one wolf, from all of them, together. The sound rolled across the north like living thunder. Darius faltered. "What?" The pendant around Lyra's neck began glowing. Soft silver light spread across the snow beneath her feet. Ancient symbols emerged from the frozen earth. Symbols older than Ravencrest. Older than kingdoms. Elder Fenric fell to one knee, the first covenant. "It still lives." The silver light expanded. It touched every White Moon Wolf, one after another. Each wolf lowered its head toward Lyra, not in fear, not in obedience. In recognition, Their leader had never been chosen by strength. She had been chosen by compassion. A deep pulse spread outward. It reached the surrounding forests, then distant mountains, then hidden valleys beyond sight. More howls answered. Hundreds, then thousands. White wolves emerged from every direction, across frozen rivers, down rocky cliffs, out of ancient pine forests untouched for centuries. The legendary packs had returned. They surrounded the coalition, not attacking, waiting, watching. Cassian's confidence vanished. This cannot happen. They obey no one, Elder Fenric quietly corrected him. They obey no ruler. They follow a protector. Darius roared in defiance and lunged once more. This time Lyra stepped forward. Only one step, she looked directly into the enormous wolf's burning eyes. You were never my enemy. You were taught to fear the wrong people, the ancient blood bond answered. Silver light flowed from the pendant. It touched Darius without violence. Without force, the great wolf staggered. Memories flooded his mind. Villages burned on Cassian's orders, broken treaties, manufactured wars, lies repeated until they became truth. His rage crumbled. His enormous body slowly lowered toward the snow. Not defeated, awakened. Cassian screamed, "Stand up!" Darius never moved. He finally looked at Lyra, then lowered his head. One knee touched the frozen earth. Silence spread through the battlefield. Coalition soldiers stared in disbelief. Their greatest warlord had bowed, not to conquest, to truth. Cassian's face twisted with desperation. He raised a concealed crossbow. No warning, no honor. He fired directly toward Lyra's heart. Tristan saw it. So did Rowan. Neither could reach her in time. A blur of white crossed the battlefield. Selene. She threw herself between the bolt and the young woman she had protected since infancy. The arrow struck her shoulder. She collapsed into the snow. "Mother!" Lyra caught her before she hit the ground. The battlefield froze. Even Cassian seemed shocked. Selene smiled weakly. "I promised, your mother, that no weapon would ever reach you." Lyra's tears fell onto Selene's trembling hands. Around them, every white moon wolf lifted its head. The mountains answered. Their unified howl shook the valley with heartbreaking power. Tristan slowly turned toward Cassian. His golden eyes had become terrifyingly calm. "You have hidden behind lies. You have hidden behind armies. You have hidden behind innocent blood." He lifted his sword. "But today, you answer to a father." The coalition began to retreat, not because they had been ordered, because hope had become stronger than fear. And for the first time in more than 2 decades, every person standing in the valley understood the same truth. The forgotten daughter had never returned to reclaim a throne. She had returned to remind the kingdoms what a true leader looked like. Snow fell quietly over the valley. The battle had not ended because one army defeated another. It had ended because the truth had finally become stronger than deception. No soldier moved. No wolf growled. The white moon wolves formed a silent circle around Lyra and the wounded Luna Selene. Selene rested against her daughter's arms, her breathing shallow but steady. The crossbow bolt had passed through her shoulder without touching her heart. Lyra pressed both hands gently against the wound. Warm silver light spread from the ancient pendant resting against her chest. The bleeding slowed, the pain eased. Selene smiled faintly. "I told you, hope always finds a way." Nearby, Alpha King Tristan Ravencrest never took his eyes off Lord Cassian Blackmore. The traitor slowly backed away through the snow. His confident smile had vanished. Around, coalition soldiers lowered their weapons one after another. No commander shouted. No battle cry remained. only silence. Cassian suddenly drew a hidden dagger. With a desperate cry, he rushed toward Lyra. "If I cannot rule, neither will she." He never reached her. Tristan moved first. His black wolf erupted with breathtaking speed. One powerful leap, one decisive strike, the dagger flew harmlessly into the snow. Cassian crashed onto the frozen ground several yards away. Before he could rise, Commander Rowan and the royal guard surrounded him, steel blades pointed toward the fallen conspirator. "It is over," Rowan's voice carried across the valley. Cassian looked around wildly. No army answered him. No ally came to his rescue. Even warlord Darius Ironfang remained kneeling where Lyra had shown him the truth. The enormous Alpha slowly returned to human form. His scarred face reflected years of regret. He looked toward Tristan. "I believed every lie. I made them into wars." Then he turned toward Lyra. "I cannot undo what I destroyed. But I will never raise my weapon against your people again." Lyra studied him for a long moment. She saw exhaustion, shame, and a man finally willing to face both. She gave a single quiet nod. "I believe you." Those 3 words carried more weight than any sentence of condemnation. Commander Rowan escorted Cassian before the gathered armies. The traitor still struggled. "You cannot imprison me. The kingdoms will never unite. They need fear." Tristan slowly approached him. Blood stained the king's armor from countless wounds suffered during the battle. His face bore cuts left by blades and claws. His hands still trembled from fighting to protect the daughter he had only just found. Yet his voice remained calm. They needed truth. They simply had to survive long enough to hear it. Rowan revealed the documents recovered from Cassian's command tent. Signed agreements, hidden payments, orders for the palace massacre. False reports blaming innocent families. Letters proving that every major conflict during the past 2 decades had been carefully engineered to keep the kingdoms divided. Gasps spread through the gathered soldiers. Many dropped to one knee, not before a king, before the truth. Cassian closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he had nothing left to manipulate. Tristan turned toward the assembled warriors. "My judgment once failed this kingdom. I will not allow vengeance to replace justice." He looked at Cassian. "You will spend the remainder of your life rebuilding every village destroyed by your conspiracy. You will repair every bridge burned for profit. You will feed every orphan your ambition created. You will live long enough to witness hope where you planted despair." The former chancellor lowered his head. He offered no argument. Then Tristan faced Darius. "And you?" The giant Alpha stood, slowly. "I marched here seeking power. I leave seeking forgiveness. I will rebuild the northern frontier with my own hands. I swear it before every wolf gathered here." The White Moon wolves remained silent. Their acceptance would be earned through years of action, not promises. Only then did Tristan finally turn toward Lyra, his daughter, the child he had mourned, the woman who had become everything he had failed to be. His sword slipped from his hand. It landed softly in the snow. The Alpha King removed his royal cloak, then his crown. He placed both upon the frozen ground. Before thousands of warriors, before villagers, before wolves, before every kingdom represented in the valley, Tristan lowered himself onto both knees, his head bowed. Tears fell freely onto the snow. "I searched battlefields. I searched kingdoms. I searched graves. But I never searched where kindness lived." His voice broke completely. "I was not there when you took your first steps. I was not there when you were frightened. I was not there when you needed a father." He looked up at her with eyes filled only with remorse. "I cannot ask you to forget. I cannot ask you to erase the years we lost. I ask only for one chance, to spend the rest of my life becoming the father you deserved." The valley became utterly silent. Lyra's own tears blurred her vision. For years she had imagined this moment. She had imagined anger, questions, accusations. Instead, she saw a broken father carrying 21 years of grief. She stepped toward him, not as a princess, not as a leader, as a daughter. She gently placed one hand beneath his chin. "So many people taught me how to survive." A small smile appeared through her tears. "Perhaps it is time someone teaches us how to become a family." Tristan could no longer hold back his emotions. He embraced her, not tightly, carefully, as though afraid she might disappear if he held her too firmly. Around them, villagers quietly smiled through tears. Commander Rowan looked toward the mountains. Selene rested peacefully against Elder Fenric, watching father and daughter reunited at last. Above the valley, hundreds of white moon wolves lifted their heads. Their unified howl rolled across the snow-covered wilderness. It was not the cry of hunters. It was the song of a family finally made whole. And every kingdom heard it. 1 year later, the northern roads no longer echoed with marching armies. They echoed with laughter. Merchants crossed borders that had once been stained by war. Children played beside rivers where soldiers had once drawn battle lines. Forgotten villages appeared on every royal map for the very first time. Their names were finally spoken inside the great hall of Ravencrest, not as distant outposts. As part of the kingdom, Princess Lyra Ashwinter refused to move permanently into the royal palace. Instead, she divided every season between Ravencrest and the northern frontier. "The people who protected me for 21 years, she often said, should never again feel forgotten." Alpha King Tristan Ravencrest never argued. He had learned that leadership was not measured by how many people followed a ruler. It was measured by how many people no longer feared tomorrow. The White Moon Wolves remained guardians of the North, no longer whispered about as terrifying legends. They became living symbols of hope. Travelers crossing dangerous mountain passes often smiled when they discovered enormous white paw prints beside the road. It meant someone was quietly watching over them. Luna Selene fully recovered. When the royal council offered her wealth, land, and noble titles, she accepted none of them. "I already received everything I ever wanted." She looked toward Lyra. "My daughter lived." Commander Rowan established a new royal guard devoted not only to protecting the crown, but also to defending the smallest villages throughout the realm. Lord Cassian spent every remaining year rebuilding the communities his deception had destroyed. Warlord Darius kept his promise, leading workers instead of warriors across the northern frontier. Neither man escaped justice. Instead, they lived with it every day. On the anniversary of the palace massacre, Tristan walked quietly into the royal memorial. Beside the small grave he had visited for more than 2 decades stood Lyra. Fresh white flowers rested upon the stone. Tristan spoke softly. "I finally know whose child sleeps here. He deserved to be remembered." Lyra gently placed another flower beside the first. "Every innocent life deserves that." Father and daughter stood together in silence, not mourning only the past, honoring everyone whose sacrifices had created their future. That evening, as the full moon illuminated Ravencrest Castle, thousands gathered in the royal courtyard. Without grand ceremony, Tristan removed the royal mantle from his shoulders. He placed it across Lyra's shoulders instead. "I once believed a kingdom needed its strongest king." He smiled proudly. "I was wrong. It needed its kindest leader." The crowd erupted in heartfelt cheers, yet the loudest voices did not come from people. Far beyond the castle walls, hundreds of white moon wolves lifted their heads toward the moon. Their ancient chorus rolled across mountains and forests, reaching every forgotten village Lyra had ever protected. The wilderness itself seemed to welcome its Queen of the North. Perhaps the greatest leaders are not those born inside palaces, but those who first learn to serve where no one else is willing to go. If you had been Lyra, would you have returned to the palace after learning the truth, or remained forever with the people who raised you? Share your answer in the comments below. If this story moved your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable werewolf romance tales filled with family, destiny, sacrifice, and hope beneath the moon.